Hello, welcome to Inside the Birds Live NFL Draft Special presented by Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. It's the exclusive Jersey Shore resort of Inside the Birds. I'm Geoff Mosher alongside Adam Caplan. And Adam, of course, Howie Roseman on day 2 of the 2023 NFL Draft does some Howie Roseman-like things. He trades out of the second round. He acquires more picks. And with the first of 2 draft picks in the third round, he takes an offensive lineman. And then some un-Eagles-like thing. For the first time in more than a decade, the Eagles use a draft pick, a third-round draft pick, a day 2 draft pick on a safety. You know, Geoff Mosher was like, oh, yeah, on that
Sure.
one, right? So let's talk about it here because 2 really intriguing prospects. And Adam, really the common bond between both of these guys is that they went to the Senior Bowl. They played a little bit differently than their natural positions that they had just played in college. And the Eagles got to see a little bit of their versatility, starting with Tyler Steen being able to play some guard and then Sidney Brown playing some post safety as opposed to just box safety.
Yeah, so let's start. One of the cool things is we're pretty lucky that we're able to get this information as we're going live here. So I've been texting a lot of coaches and so forth and around the league. I'm like, hey, have you seen this guy? What do you think? And obviously, if they're going to go the first 3 rounds, they better have seen him. If it's the 7th rounder, maybe not, but. Anyway, so yeah, so when you look at Sidney Brown, first of all, this is a guy who had 2nd and 3rd round grades from teams. The Eagles were somewhere in that area. So this is a guy we talked about. It's funny, when we did the show with Greg, the pre-first round draft show, the live show leading up to that first round, this is the only safety from Illinois or DB that we really talked about that we thought they would probably get, or at least had a chance to get, because we knew they liked him. And he's not now. What we're told is he's not a slot corner. I know there are some of the other safety they had there can play slot, but this kid's not a slot.
Right.
He could play strong or free. He could play as a split safety. We're told he's a really good football player. And I want to get this quote right because this guy said I could read it. And you guys will love this one. So go ahead. What do you know? But as I find it.
Well, you're talking about Sidney Brown, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Eagles really made a point to say that while he played at Illinois as mostly a box safety and he showed he could hit and he could tackle, that at the Senior Bowl, he played a lot more of post and he was able to show his range, his athleticism. He did have 6 interceptions. I don't know if I want to call him a ball hawk. You know, we ran into that issue with Anthony Harris a few years ago. He just happened to have a lot of picks. I think he led the NFL, and then that's not what he really was. But what you really get with Sidney Brown, by the way, is just a tremendous leader, high character, really smart, really instinctive. They called him a red star player. And usually those guys translate well to the NFL. They understand their responsibilities and they can play at a baseline level.
So notes on what he can do in terms of coverage. He can match tight ends, but he's not a nickel. He's close to the ball, functional in the hash, smart, never out of position, leadership stuff. Yes, will make plays on the ball when he's got a chance. He doesn't miss a lot of opportunities. And the guy threw this in. And he goes, "Hey man, this guy knows that you and I do a show." He goes, "Eagle fans are going to love him. He's tough as nails." And he said something else with a curse, so I'm not going to repeat it. So.
This what does it rhyme with? No, I'm just kidding.
Hitting.
Yeah, gotcha.
but the thing is, I just thought it's comical because you never know how it's going to work out. I made sure because you and I had the same information on that show with Greg. We better start talking about him because I heard the Eagles really liked him. And look, if they didn't draft him, they didn't draft him. But I just want to make sure we talked about him. But we didn't talk about Tyler Steen though. No. But we will because we got great intel on him as well.
Yeah, so let's go back to Steen. Really interesting prospect, right? Because he was a left tackle at Vanderbilt, also a right tackle at Vanderbilt. He spent his last year in college at Alabama, plays left tackle at Alabama. Usually, a guy like that, you feel like you're going to hear in the top 15. But again, at the Senior Bowl, he showed he can play guard. Apparently, Jeff Stoutland liked him. We talked about the Stout stamp of approval with some other linemen who are going to be in the first round. But Nick Sirianni made it clear, Adam, and I think this is what's good about the pick, is that you have a nice little 3-man competition here at right guard to replace Isaac Seumalo. Tyler Steen Jack Driscoll and of course Cam Jurgens. And it's, I think, as Nick Sirianni said, may the best man win. So they have some good options here.
It's one of these rare situations when you look at Tyler Steen. If you look at how tall he is, he's like, well, how in the world could he play inside? Well, folks, it's very rare for a guy 6'6" to have arms shorter than 33 inches. He does. And that's the big reason why. He is a guard. The coaches I spoke with said he's a guard. He's enough of an athlete, a little bit underrated in that area. He's a little bit. He says this guy said one of the two guys I spoke to about Steen tonight said he was better than you think on tape, but he's not long term. He's smart enough and athletic enough to get you through a couple game stretch, to play at left tackle, but his limitations of arm length and overall strength, or overall footwork, are why you're going to move him inside. He's a good kid, another smart guy. By the way, I don't have time to look this up. I like that they're Howie finally got in his head. He's got to start drafting SEC players in the last couple of years. Obviously, going back to obviously Devontae Smith and Dickerson. I don't know what's happened about Alabama not drafting these guys. Now they're ODing on them, but it's hard not to. It's like kind of like, folks, you follow the college programs. University of Miami was kind of a lock. If you drafted a guy in the 80s and 90s, University of Miami, you're probably going to be right.
Yeah. Well, I had a friend text me that it seems like the Eagles' game plan is to draft offensive players from Alabama and defensive players from Georgia. And that seems like that would be a pretty good winning combination, because both of those programs produced outstanding guys on those sides of the ball. Yeah.
So those are my opening thoughts. It's hard to knock these picks, and we'll have more for you Monday morning on our on all of our platforms when we drop our regular schedule and that show. But just my open thoughts were, I know some people were kind of upset they better not draft Bijan because they got to address the defense. Well, you guys should be happy. Carter, Smith, Brown, Steen for guard, right, for that right guard spot, which would have been Paris Johnson's had the boardwalk worked out. If Carter would have been gone and Paris Johnson been there, probably going to be the guy, but doesn't matter now. That was blown up by the Cardinals, who kind of did something interesting. That's another talk for another time. But they address current and future needs. What else could you say? I mean, I know these guys got to play. Got to see how they do.
Yeah.
But it's when we started the show many years ago, I mean, we didn't want to be overly negative, but sometimes we go, look, we didn't want to say it's a reach. We're like, okay, not a bad player. This guy could do this thing, but you never felt like really enthused.
Right.
Kind of hard to knock these picks.
Yeah, no, definitely. Look, we went into the draft and we talked a lot about, especially for the offensive line, why is it that guys like Paris Johnson and Peter Skronsky would even be considered when the Eagles have so many good linemen? But clearly there was an opening at right guard, but also we talked about depth, and at losing Andre Dillard, you didn't have anyone that you felt really comfortable stepping in at left tackle. Even though Tyler Steen's a guard here for now, right? He played left tackle at Alabama and Vanderbilt in the SEC for 4 years. So he gives you a guy who, if need be in a pinch, can probably, let's say Mailata gets hurt, can probably step in there, and we'll have to see. But I mean, I imagine in their minds, they believe that he can be in a pinch, a left tackle if need be, even though that's not his long-term home. So you sort of kill two birds with one stone there. It makes a lot of sense. It's not just about an immediate need. It's a need for the future of the interior offensive line. And the same thing with Sidney Brown. I mean, the Eagles had gotten to a point with safety where it was starting to be like linebacker again, or old linebacker, where not only was there just not great talent, but there wasn't even somebody young in the pipeline to come up that you can see as a starter 3 or 4 years down the road. And you hope that Sidney Brown can be that guy. He really should. First safety they've drafted again since 2011 in the top 3 rounds since 2011. That was Jaquan Jarrett from Temple. No need to go into that. It's just the point what has been that it's been over a decade since they used this kind of pick on a safety.
Now, just to be clear, I ran this by someone. He doesn't have CJ Gardner-Johnson's ball skills. That's elite, but this kid's pretty good. Sidney Brown. The picks were not a fluke. The tape shows that he anticipated well. He was in the right spot. It's a really good football player. It's a good value. Brown. Now, I got 3rd and 4th round grades on Steen, so this is kind of where he should have gone. But Brown certainly could have gone the second round, but the Eagles didn't have a second rounder, as you know.
No, they did not have a second rounder, and it's kind of interesting. They get the 2 third-round picks, but then they also add. They still don't have a 4th and a 5th round pick. I thought somehow they would figure out a way to get that, but instead they wind up having a 6th round pick and 3 7ths. So they do get to participate tomorrow and at least have 4 picks to try to round out the roster. Maybe a running back there, maybe a linebacker. I would have to think is an area that they're looking at, perhaps cornerback. We'll see. But, when you look at the total summation from the first 2 days, defensive line, pass rusher, offensive line, and then finally safety. It's like they finally admitted. Howie Roseman, by the way, joked about this.
Did he?
Press conference.
Oh, to you?
Bob Lang, the PR guy, had prepared him for questions about him finally drafting rounds, and I wasn't even there. So I was watching, but I wasn't there. But obviously, people were prepared to get on him for it.
And honestly, none of these were reaches. These picks don't have to be defended.
Right. You know what I mean? They don't reek of just all analytics. I mean, no, they're just
like the Davion Taylor one. I remember when we did that whatever post-draft show we did. I just remember thinking, we just can't lie here. This is ridiculous of a reach it was.
Right.
That was probably in the history of our show the biggest reach. I don't know. Maybe you could think one was more, but that was pretty bad reach.
No, that's about as big as it gets. Yeah.
Because even their grade was almost 3 rounds lower. But no panic here. Great job by Howie in terms of planning, execution. He only had to give up a 4th. He moved up. He make sure they got him and no one else traded ahead of him to get Carter. Smith was a guy that was not only was he much higher on their board, this is what we said in our pre-draft show with Greg, that this is one of their trade down candidates. And geez, they'd have to trade down to get him. We're gonna have more on that show, our next show. I want more opinions. I'm just dumbfounded of why teams made excuses. And the guys that I spoke with said, well, he's sort of a tweener, he's smaller than you'd like. I'm like, yeah, but the production, you can move him around. And Greg said that there are some snaps where he played as a stack linebacker. And by the way, coaches love when you could put a guy inside who could rush. I don't know what the league, man, these teams make excuses why. And by the way, that's why some of them are going to be wrong, because they overthink it sometimes. So because I wasn't with you guys to talk about these picks, but Tyler Steen, a guy's going to get a chance to compete for a starting job in year 1 as a 3rd round pick. I mean, it's not it. Now, some people say, well, it's because they don't have a right guard. Yeah, that's true. Can't argue against it. But the he went where he's supposed to, and 3rd round picks are expected by the end of their rookie contract to compete for a starting job. They're not drafted as backups, by the way. That's not the way it works.
Right.
3rd round picks by NFL standards, talking to people I trust, they think it's, I don't want to curse here, but they think it's complete nonsense. Anyone who says like, oh, backups are drafted in the 3rd, that's why you draft them, completely false.
Gotcha. All right.
4th, yes. But not
so let's just to make sure we have good balance, and we've talked about this. Sidney Brown. He's obviously not a blazing, you mentioned, not a Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, not gonna just a different kind of guy. Chauncey was a coverage guy, a nickel by trade who moved to safety. Brown is like, let's say you got Tyreek Hill and you line him up as the 3 on a 3-by-1 inside, and he just runs vertically at the safety. No. That's an area where Brown's going to struggle. That's an area where any safety is going to struggle. But bad example. But against the faster receivers, they're going to take aim at him. Tyler Steen, big guy, physical guy. One of the things I got on him is they would, for an offensive lineman, one of the I spoke to an AFC personnel guy. He said he liked him. He just wished he was a little bit more physical, a little bit more tougher, a little bit more meaner type of a guy. But you get coached up by Jeff Stoutland, maybe some of that comes out. And I absolutely remember hearing these things about Isaac Seumalo as well, his early years, that he lacked confidence, or he didn't come off as this physical, nasty, mean guy. And he did struggle early on, but eventually he became a really, really good starter for the Eagles. So even if it takes Steen a little bit, again, he's one of 3 options right now to compete at that spot. Wanted to just put a tie on this with yesterday's picks again. You talked about Nolan Smith, a guy we talked about in the podcast, sort of all over the map. Just teams were just divided or not divided. Just he could have been anywhere to upper first round or lower first round is what we are hearing from different people, just based on how you evaluated his and projected him. That was really a big thing for him. But with Jalen Carter, a lot came out today, in particular after the fact, about just how difficult he can be, maybe to coach or to be a teammate of. I mean, there were several different reports that sort of popped up that were about more than just the car collision. So this is a gamble the Eagles take. And one thing we should make clear, Howie Roseman said, Dom DeSandro, our VP of security, presents us all the information, right? And gives us this to be able to make this pick. Well, it doesn't mean all the information they got was glowing. It just means they knew it. They knew what they were getting into with Jalen Carter. I think that's really important. They made this decision knowing that whatever's out there, the Eagles know it. Just know that.
Yeah, look, we'll talk more about this in our next show when we're going to do much bigger player profiles. So this is just basically a review of kind of our early word, but
right.
I was doing TV the last 2 days, so I didn't really see a lot that's out there. But yes, there's way more than the incident. It's having issues with teammates. It's and so forth. So yeah, there's some stuff out there that's probably been talked about, and we'll get more into that. But you just stick to the talent standpoint. This guy's got ridiculous amount of talent. And if they could get him to stay on the straight and narrow, and he matures and he's serious about his job, he's got a chance to be special, because he's got it in him, that's for sure. And they've got a good support staff here, and they've got a great locker room. This is something we don't really talk a lot about. Is no locker room's ever perfect, but based on the crap that was going on in 2020, a lot of stuff we talked then, it was almost depressing to do the show with you that year.
It was rough.
and the locker room's terrible. Entitlement, immaturity. Howie's done a remarkable job of changing this locker room. Again, we don't talk about a lot now. That's, I bring it up because this is going to help him. Now it's going to be up to the kid to get himself righted and all that, but we'll see. But I'm sure they're going to have a plan to get him going here.
All right. Last point. Tomorrow, 4 picks. You'll be on with Andrew DeCecco to recap it after the end of the 7th round. This is traditionally the area where we do see the Eagles pay a lot of attention to analytics, where they want traits. So you might see, like, again, linebacker, running back, perhaps those positions where traits really stand out, and maybe even some red flag guys with characters. They've done that in the last day too, just to try to throw, as we say, throw darts. And if you hit on one guy or two guys, like Quez Watkins, for example, who was a 6th round pick from a couple of years ago, then you do well. So this, I would expect a lot of trait laden guys on day 3.
No, I agree. And it's funny because I know Bill Polian told me this, that he would turn pretty much, it would be his call who they take. He would call day 3 the scouts day. Tell me who you want. Let's huddle up. Let's talk about it. We already have our grades. But if it's close, we're going to go with who you want. And I thought that's pretty cool. And I know Howie in that draft now, unfortunately, other than Watkins, Hightower's a disaster. Well, I don't know. I forget who else they drafted on the last day. But that's when the receiver room was unbelievably immature. Now they've got maybe the most mature room in the National Football League. It's crazy how that worked out.
Yeah, I think Casey Toohill was the last pick in that draft.
And he went to Washington. They should have cut him. By the way, he's still.
I think they're pretty good on DN.
No. What I'm saying is he's still with Washington.
Yeah. And then I think last year was when they picked like Jacoby Stevens, or that was 2 years ago. Kyron Johnson last year was a guy who ran really well. So you look for those special teams guys.
Yeah.
And guys who have great traits. So I would expect that as we preview day 3. That's going to do it. I want to thank our producer, Jimmy Hyden, doing a great job. Stayed up late with us tonight so that we could get this live stream out. So Jimmy Hyden from Public Square Media, we thank you. For Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher. You've been watching Inside the Birds Live NFL Draft Special.